Get them arguing, people. Shadow Eater, one angry pagan. This one is it's kind of inspired by a conversation I was having earlier on Discord. Am I too idealistic? I never thought I was, really, but it was put to me that I'm idealistic. Okay. I've always tried to see if there's more than one side to anything, because whilst the facts don't change, everyone has a different view about the facts for some fucking reason. So when I make a decision about something, when I decide, like, I believe something, it's because I've been given evidence as to why I should believe that. Now, goes to my paganism, but this isn't, it goes to my paganism as well, but that doesn't mean that I'm here to, what's that fucking word? Proselytize. No. Forget the paganism side of it. I try to look at these things, when I look at things going forward, just using as an example, okay? Britain going forward politically. Now, there are several different paths that we are on right now. Like, if you can imagine it, we're on like a highway, like a motorway, and then, but that at any point has every chance of taking a different route to get to a certain position. Now, I try to view all of these and try to figure out which to me is the most logical, which is the most reasonable. Now, looking forward, I am both fearful, angry. Let's say both. I am all of, fearful, angry, hopeful, and he's also hopeful, and I think a good way forward is plausible. It's possible. Not just plausible, it's possible. With the with my generation, 30, I'm 30 years old exactly, and so that puts me in the millennial bracket, towards the end of, mid to end of the millennial bracket. And my generation are just coming in now, and I think because we aren't moving right like the previous generations did, like Bowler Hat Man, I do believe that our parliament is likely to get more progressive, given as the different generations take over. Okay. Now, this this leads me to be hopeful. I don't think that's a bad thing, but I also don't think it's unrealistic because it's based on evidence. Not only that, but I'm also fearful of the future because despite my generation moving less right here and in America, in Europe, this seems to be a little different, as well as elsewhere, not just Europe. And given that hot wars are starting to build up now, I'm worried that we are heading into another era of war, of active wars. Now, I'm not saying that the last 70 years has been peaceful, like wholly peaceful, I should say. But given the hundreds of years before that, I don't know. I think it was. It's been, whilst there was fear, the levels to which people died that people died before, and the levels to which people died afterwards has been a bit different. The standard of life getting better and whatnot. Now that's not everywhere. That we can't be ignorant. Other places in the world other than here have gotten worse, and in many cases that's down to the UK and the US and Europe being greedy bastards. But I also think that in the West, we are starting to turn a corner. Like, it's not just people who, like, normal people. It's not just general public. Like, more people with power and money are like turning away from the right wing. Now that's a really weird thing to say, but I'm talking about people my age or younger. Or, okay, a bit more generous than that, 35 or younger. It's not to say that there aren't many my age who are right wing, because there are. But more often than not, they didn't become right wing, they were brought up right wing. It's a bit different. And with the rise of, I mean, with my generation and generations under me moving away from right-wing talking points and speaking out more against this stuff, the woke agenda, we've got older generation, more of the older generation starting to speak out against this bullshit as well, at an older age. Now, again, that's not to say that all old people are ignorant fucking bellends, because they're not. But I find that the older you are, the more stuck in your ways you are. And humans' ability to adapt is our adaptation. Like we adapt how we think. As I said, that's how we've got, as one of the big reasons we got to this point, because we are able to adapt the way we think, not just it's not just a case of adaptation of the body, it's an adaptation of the mind. Our minds seem to be, like, it can be argued that we're pretty concrete in our minds, but I would say that we evolve. And that is just coming off of scientific philosophy. I take a scientific law of physics and make that philosophy. In that for nearly every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Or that of entropy. Everything changes. So, yeah, I'm optimistic for a lot of things. I look at Labour and I see promising things. I also see things I don't like. What are these things I don't like? Well, the fact that we're not calling on Israel to the fact that the Israel is such a taboo subject. We should be calling out Israel. We should also be calling out Hamas at the same time. And this might piss people off, but again, I don't like. We can call for a ceasefire all you like. The Daleks of Skaro are not going to listen. So we should be moving to put motions and bills forward that actively push against Israel. Now, we do need to think about the fact that when Starmer gets into power, he's going to have to be diplomatic. But no, I'm not happy with that. I'm also not happy with a lot of the watering down or coming out with something, and people say U-turns, but I think it's a case of them not properly thinking about it first, which is why I think they've moved to a different tack, with this bomb-proof thing. That, I think, is, whilst people can consider that as that's watering down policies, possibly, or they want to make sure that the policies they have actually come into effect. Or it could be a bit of both. Honestly, really, it could be a bit of both. I don't like how Rachel Reeves comes. I really don't like her. I think a lot of the caution is coming from her. Not to say that Starmer isn't trying to be cautious himself in many respects. Again, I watched the Nick Ferrari video where he's interviewing Starmer, and Starmer is asked whether he approves of the shutting down of water and electricity. If he approves of collective punishment. Now, he did not actually say he approved of collective punishment. And whilst he did say that he approved of the shutting down of electricity and water at the time, I am pretty damn sure I've heard him in an interview backtrack on that. Essentially, backtrack on that. Now, that doesn't look good, but I think people have to be considerate of the fact he has an Israeli wife, or a wife who has family in Israel. A Jewish wife who has family in Israel. Now, I'm no fan of Israel. I don't want to be nice to Israelis. To Israel. I don't want to be right to it. That's not fair. I don't want to be nice to the Israeli government, because I'm not. They don't deserve it. But it would be nice if people actually would take nuance into account here instead of just being outraged. Anyway, it's not something that I'm a big fan of. In any case, Labour are shit at communicating. Wow. There are a couple of good communicators in there. Now, I hate to say this, but Wes Streeting actually gets his points across very well. And I don't like him. I really don't like him. But he gets his points across very well, I think. Steph Creasy's another one who I think is very clear in what she says and very reasonable in what she says. obviously I like Ben Bradshaw, the Exeter MP, but he's leaving at the come the election. I'm not sure about David Lammy. I'm actually not sure about David Lammy. So someone will have to. I'm gonna have to. I think I'm gonna have to take a deeper dive into David Lammy, see what kind of person he actually. I don't know who he is really. Like, okay, I know who he is, but I don't much. I really don't know much about him. I think I ought to correct that. Oh, what's her face? I like Lisa Nandy. I think she can be a bit of a ditz sometimes, but I think that's relatable. And again, I think she gets her points across pretty clearly. I'm trying to think of an. There's a name right on the tip of my tongue, and I like this. Ed fucking Miliband. I actually really like Ed Miliband. I couldn't give a fuck about the way he eats a bacon sandwich. If Ed became leader again, I would be happy with that. Because everything that I've heard from Ed shows to me that he's more progressive than he perhaps came across as in 2015, whatever it was. And he's quite a humble dude. I like Ed Miliband. Now, I haven't been able to substantiate these claims, but if they are true, I'm not happy about this either. The cutting out of left-wing, more prominently left-wing candidates for the next election. Now, if this is true, I am not best pleased. Depending, and I will caveat this, depending on whether or not they are actually a bit dodgy. Because just because you're on the far left doesn't mean you can't be dodgy. You know, Marxist-Leninists, bit dodgy, bit authoritarian, you know. Anyway, Starmer, there's a part of me that does wish he was more charismatic, but at the same time, I like boring. At this point in time, I would prefer boring over charismatic. You know, I wish Labour would be a bit more. I wish they would actually come out with something more solid on education. And I want to see, if they don't go ahead with any of this devolution, I will be upset. That is one thing that will piss me off. If they don't go ahead with any further devolution, especially progressive devolution, I will be really pissed. But I don't, as we are in a democracy, I don't expect any one party to hold do all of the things I want. If they get at least half of the things I want done, or just under that, maybe just under that, I can take, then go for it. But under Conservatives, we've had fuck all. And then I'll make this argument. Until we get PR, I think it is almost futile to expect so much of our parties at present. I actually think it's a bit futile. A lot of demand, a lot of expectations. People want Labour to do this, they want Labour to do that. But I think, given that we aren't in a PR system, I think people and given the breadth and diversity of thought and personality and way people would like this country to be run, we can't expect such broad church parties to do exactly what we want. And I think I get really frustrated with people who get upset, constantly upset with the Labour Party not doing what they want, or everything they want, and they're not going to. Now, that's the situation we're in. That's the board. This is the board. That's the game we have to play. Okay. If we can change the board, we can change the game. But if we're still on the same board, I don't get how you can change the game. Unless, obviously, it's a checkers board. If you're playing chess, then you're playing fucking chess. You're not playing Jingo. Jenga. Sorry, Jingo. You're not playing Jenga. You're not playing fucking Monopoly. That's a board game, right? You can't just go from... If you're given the board of the chessboard, that's the game you play. Now, we can move over the next decade to get PR. And I do think it's going to be a decade-long job. But just sitting there going, it's never going to happen, whilst saying that you want it, is a bit intellectually redundant. If someone can explain that to me, I would be chuffed. Please, in the comments. I don't get it. I don't understand that. Now, that could just be me. Not me being stupid, me not being able to understand it. I just don't understand it. So, am I the idealistic? I really don't consider myself idealistic. Now, I also understand that not a lot of people consider themselves idealistic, even though they are. This is a very good point. But I do feel that I do work from evidence, and I'm not just looking at from a bias. Do I have biases? Yes. But when I'm trying to make a decision, I try to take my bias out of it, because I know that you end up with a confirmation bias fallacy. It's so easy to end up in confirmation bias fallacy. And I work very hard not to fall into that trap myself. So, yes, I'm going to be getting people to try and vote Labour or Lib Dems if Labour haven't got a chance in a certain area. I will be championing Labour policies if I feel that they're good, which there are a number that sound pretty good to me. But we can't just be going round the same circle. Oh, it's always going to be the same. Is it though? Because it hasn't always been the same, has it? Some things, time rhymes. It doesn't replicate. I mean, for me, this comes from this comes from my paleontological, side of things. Convergent evolution isn't replication; it's rhyming. It looks similar, but it's not exactly the same. But you are still working to a similar design. I said working to a similar design. That's the wrong words. They're still working to a similar point of evolution. Now, whilst things rhyme, that doesn't mean things don't change. I don't like to see things as an actual like my religious side of me sees things as a cycle, but my science brain looks at that, extrapolates it, and says, "Isn't it more like a loop going forwards throughout? Going as time moves on, space and time move forward, yeah, as well as happening all at the same time. Time's very strange, but given that things happen in a loop, the same thing doesn't happen every time, and we learn slowly in many cases, but we still learn. And there are many people on these islands that can do what we want people to do. You need to be given the circumstances to be able to do what they can do, and the chance to be able to do what they can do. This is going to be a difficult decade. Last decade and a half has been bloody hard, but this next decade is going to be difficult for a different reason, and that's because wars, climate change, and in this country anyway, or in this union, as I was corrected on earlier, we have a lot to fix. A lot to fix. It's not perfect anywhere. There are a lot of things in Scotland that I would prefer to be I would prefer to see instituted also down here. But it's not perfect up in Scotland, is it? I mean, come on. It's the same with Wales and Northern Ireland. There's a lot to fix. You know, the big one I missed in that little list I had then? Fucking Brexit, my God. An idealistic person would look at the situation we're in and think either that we can just rejoin or that we can make Brexit work. I don't believe either. Now, I do believe we can rejoin. It's going to take a fucking long time. It's the same as working for PR. It's going to take a while. But we can't. None of that work is going to be able to be done with the Tories in power. And if we can get the Lib Dems to a point where they are the official opposition, like that, we've got a progressive parliament going on there. Starmer, I think time's going to tell. I think. I mean, I don't see myself as idealistic. I look at myself as seeing the evidence and drawing my conclusions from the evidence presented. Evidence presented to me is that Starmer is trying to get Labour into power. And I think that to the Tories he's trying to convince, he's kind of lying to them in many ways. But I don't think that he wants to be lying to people. Again, I think we have to consider the necessity of the situation. I don't think there are a lot of people who are going to accept a brutally honest analysis of this country from top politicians. There are quite a few people who will, but there are also quite a few people who won't, and I know there are. I speak to these people. It's quite ridiculous. it's going to be hard work trying to convince Labour that the things we need are the things that we need, like PR. I think Labour are, having to make hard decisions because of the position that the Tories have put them in. I just do. I've not been convinced otherwise. I've not been given actual evidence that proves to me that Starmer is a malicious worker, that he's doing what he's doing in the same light as a Tory would do it. That just doesn't ring true to me. Not with the evidence given. The man is trying to ice skate. Forget a mini vase, whilst holding a fucking rattlesnake. We'll look at the manifesto, and then I can decide whether or not that I can be more optimistic about the future, or whether or not I need to be more measured. But right now, with a new workers' rights bill coming in, with possible, hopefully probable, green transition, proper moves to a green transition, possible, hopefully probable, devolution, progressive devolution. Reworking the tax system, fixing the NHS, rebuilding our education system, and that's the schools as well as the system in and of itself. What can I say? There are good things, but at the same time, Rachel Reeves coming out with stuff like, we're not gonna go, put back the caps on the bankers. What are you being stupid for? I don't think she's going to be an austerity chancellor. However, I think she might be overcautious. Again, I've not actually made my decision. I don't like her, but I've not actually made a full decision on what I think she's going to be like, because I haven't seen the manifesto. I haven't seen them in power yet. How can I judge someone when on what they're likely to do when Labour haven't been in power for 14 years now? I can only go on the evidence given. And the last time Labour were in government, they got a bunch of things right and a bunch of things wrong. The Tories got nothing right, apart from the gay marriage thing. There's a lot they got wrong. With Labour, I see more was happening. Life didn't seem so shit. Essentially, now I get that I was a kid back then, but I did not have a great childhood, so I'm not going to accept being accused of rose-tinted glasses. But when I look back and I talk to other people about what it was like when I was growing up, it wasn't shit. It's shit now. There's an objective difference between Labour and the Tories. Now, people are trying to tell me that I'm just thinking of the last Labour government, and this Labour government is only going to be like the Tory government. I haven't been given evidence to that end. Just haven't. I've got people giving me their feelings, but no fucking actual evidence. And people are saying, oh, Labour U-turn, Labour U-turn. Labour aren't in fucking government. If they're in government and they go against their policies that they put up in the manifesto, that's a fucking U-turn. Saying you want to be able to do something, saying you're going to be able, you know, we're going to try and do this, getting further on and finding out that's not going to be possible, and then having to go when it's not going to be possible, or it's going to be less, it's going to be harder to do than we thought. That's not a U-turn. So, you know, I really do think people are missing on nuance, and I don't believe myself to be idealistic. Challenge me on this if you like. I'm welcome to it. I don't want to start rows with anyone. I just want people to see that not everything is shit. We're not, whilst we're in a shit situation nationally, we can come back from this. It is possible. But when people are just complaining without coming up with a viable alternative, not just some fucking thing they want, but viable alternative, when they're not coming up with a viable alternative and they're just complaining, it gets to me when people try to call me idealistic. Just a bit. Especially when I'm only going from the evidence that I've been given. So, this is me basically saying I'm not idealistic. I'm optimistic. Sort of. Again, I have fears. And I am angry. But I do have hope. As I said before in another video, hopium is better than copium. I mean, it's better to have what we need actually being done, but hopium's still better than copium. Anyway, this has been Shadow Eater, one angry pagan. Blessed Thursday, guys. Good way to see you.